Rick Dollar here for the Rick Dollar Show, and joining me today is Mr. John Cowan, the legendary John Cowan. John, how are you, sir?
I am about as good as a person can be, Rick.
That seems to be a good thing for you, man. I mean, you got a day off, so we're gonna have a little chat here, if that's all right.
Let's chat up.
I got it. Hey, I love this new book, "Hold to a Dream," from Backbeat Books. But now, if we um, go to the credits here up front, it's written by John Cowan with Jim Schwartz, uh,
Yes,
and the foreword was done by Wendy Waldman.
yes.
And that speaks for itself. But this seems to be, I don't know, kind of a history of what John Cowan did in the music business, more than anything. Am I correct? Or
Yeah, it's a pretty kind of it's a curious slash interesting way to do a memoir, and the way it all happened was is kind of a happy accident. I had this radio show on WSM, which is the home of the Grand Ole Opry.
yep.
This would have been 7 years ago, I believe, but doesn't matter. And once a month, I had a show on the air, and the show lasted for an hour. And I did it for I believe there's 15 interviews in the book, and so there were 15 shows that lasted over the course of 15 months.
Wow.
um, and it was a peer-to-peer interview show, which means that I'm a musician and interviewing other musicians, so to speak.
Hmm.
Uh, and my friend Jim Schwartz, we've been friends since 1987. He was an advertising executive in Chicago. He's retired since probably about 3 years ago. Anyways, whenever I go to Chicago, our friendship was such that I would always see Jim, and we'd go out. We'd make a point to go out and eat deep dish Chicago pizza. I don't know.
Sounds good to
I don't know.
me.
I don't, I don't know if he was as thrilled with the idea since he lives there as I was, but he always relented and would do it. So probably 6 years ago, we were out eating, having our traditional um, deep dish pizza meeting. And I happened to mention to him that I'd had this radio show, and he's like, "I never knew that." It's like, "Yeah, it was really interesting." I told him who all the people were that I interviewed, and he said, "Do you have a do you have that do you have those interviews like on a thumb drive or anything?" I was like, "Yeah, sure." So I literally uh, uploaded all the interviews, all 15 interviews, onto a thumb drive. I sent it to him in the mail, and lo and behold, about 2 months later, he gets in touch with me and he says, "I've transcribed every word."
Wow.
He didn't use a digital program to do it either.
AI was not involved, huh?
Not at that point. And he said, "I think this is a book." And I said, "Well, yeah, you might be right about that." So we went and we shopped the book as just the interviews.
Hmm.
And one of the first people we talked to was University of Illinois Press, which publishes kind of academic books, academia. And they were interested in the book. Um, and they said, "Would you write intros to each of these artists that you interviewed and kind of share
Wow.
personally what they mean to you, etc." I said, "Well, sure." Um, so I did that. We sent it off. It took a while. Jimmy had to call me every couple of weeks and go, "I need Bernie Ledden this week," or "I need Chris Christopherson next week." And I was like, "Okay." Uh, but the publisher actually really liked it. The intros, they basically said, "We think you're a pretty darn good natural writer. Why don't you kind of make this into a memoir?" So the and so that was what the genesis of the book and how it was put together. And then we ended up finally at a different publisher that does music books almost exclusively, which is Backbeat Books or Backbeat Publishing.
Hmm.
And the book finally came out. It took a long time to get it together, to get it done, to get a publishing deal, to have it printed up. And it just came out, I think, on the 21st of May. So
Yeah.
that's a long answer to a short question.
That's okay, man.
But that's
Um,
kind of the journey. That's kind of the journey we went on to make it be a book and have it be published.
Man, it's great to have friends in that business, you know. Let me tell you. Um, what I'm understanding here is, I mean, I've been around you. I know what kind of musician you are. I know what kind of musical person you are. Um,
Hmm.
but these quotes in the book were just awesome. So I had to pull three of those, man. And you know, the first one was from Rodney Crowell. Um, John Cowan is tapped into a musical life force. How does that make you feel coming from Rodney Crowell?
Kind of like, who are you talking to?
Yeah. Who is that?
Me, moi?
Oh, you know you are, man. I mean, my gosh. We're going to talk about this, but for crying out loud. I mean,
Yeah.
dude, you've been there and you've done that, you know?
Well, that's an interesting story part of the book, actually, about because once we had the book put together, then you have to get quotes from people that go on the
Hmm.
outside cover and the back cover, and we've all seen that. That's a part of every book, pretty much, to help publicize and help. And when it's sitting in a store, if somebody picks it up, they might see a name that they recognize and go, "Oh, this is interesting. Maybe I
Sure.
should check this book up." So I made this. Jim at one point said, "Look, we need to. I need for you to make a fantasy list of the people you'd like to have write a quote for you that we can put in the book." And so I fired off a list and sent it to Jim, and Jimmy got back to me. He said, "Well, that's great. Can you actually get these people?" And I thought, maybe. I mean, I knew every one of them, right? Like
Yeah. I mean,
I'd known Garth Brooks since 1988. We've
wow.
been friends. We were on the same label. He was a big Newgrass Revival fan. And I got a hold of his manager and said, "I have a request of Garth. I'm doing this book." So we went through this same process with all these people you see on the book cover. Same with Lyle Lovett. There's a bunch of great quotes by a bunch of great people, and I just happen to have um, either a working relationship or a personal relationship with all of them. And so, I mean,
Yeah.
we were kind of when we came back to the publisher with the quotes, they were like, "Oh my goodness."
Yeah, really. I mean, that's an incredible thing just to have Rodney Crowell say about you. Tim O'Brien is a very well known person in the bluegrass and Americana industry too. John Cowan is the soul of the earth bass playing fiend, and he has a voice that's made in heaven.
Hmm.
Wow,
I know, right?
it's amazing to me, man. But the big one, Jerry Garcia
Oh
has a
yeah.
quote in this: "Man, you're a monster." And dude, I've
Yeah.
heard you play. I mean, I know exactly what he means.
That happened at the very the next to very last show that Newgrass Revival ever did
Wow.
was at the Oakland Coliseum, and it was New Year's 1989-90. And we'd been trying to get an opening slot with the Dead for 15 years.
Much like the
Um,
rest of the world.
and we finally finagled our way into getting on that show. It was kind of bittersweet because we finally got on a Dead show, but it was the band was breaking up and we all knew
Yeah.
it. And Jerry hung out on the side of the stage while we were playing, and he came up, of course he wanted to talk to us all, and he was like, "Man, we got to do this more. We need more. We need you guys to come out and do more shows with us." And we were like, "Well, we're actually breaking up."
Yeah.
And he was like, "Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that." And before he left, he stuck out, or he left and walked away. He stuck his hand out and shook my hand. He said, "Man, you are a monster." And I think he meant that in the right way.
Yeah. I think so. Just amazes me though, man. All these people in the music industry that have been around you playing music, and
Mhm.
mostly people that know you, um, all have great things to say about you. And I mean, it's just something to be very proud of. I think a lot of people get lost in the shuffle in the industry sometimes, but John Cowan never has. I'll have to say that.
Well, the truth about the matter is that, I've been blessed with, I came up with, when I joined the Newgrass Revival when I was 21. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's kind of the beginning of anyone's professional life. And when you're about that age, whether you go to
Mm-hmm.
college or whatever. And I just happened to join this band called the Newgrass Revival. And it's still to this day, which that I was only in the band 15 years, but here we are. I'm 70 now. And most people still know me. I've done a lot besides those 15 years in my life, but I'm it's it makes me I'm very proud of the fact that I was in that band and we did so much great work, and
Oh yeah.
it introduced me to a world of musicians I would have not met otherwise.
That's exactly right. And I mean, that's it just it shocks me, man. That what a storied career. And we're going to go into this a little more in a moment, but you've got this new song out called Fiction. Um,
Hmm.
my listeners like to hear a little bit of a backstory and maybe how this thing came about, or you got a short one up for me on that one?
Absolutely. So Eddie Sanders is this great songwriter. He's a great singer. He's a bluegrass artist. He's been around. He's younger than I am. Eddie might be 58. I'm not sure how old he is, but he's been, people in the bluegrass world know him. And
Mm-hmm.
I went to sing on one of his records that Scott Vestal, my friend Scott Vestal,
Yeah.
legendary banjo player, recording engineer, and producer.
Mm-hmm.
He called me and said, do you want to come over here and sing on Eddie's record?" And I said, "Well, sure." So I went over and I sang on Eddie's record, and I realized when I got there to work on his music, I thought, this guy's really good. I mean, he's a really fine songwriter and he's a fine singer, and I didn't realize, but he told me, "Yeah, I wrote all these songs on this record." And I was like, "Holy crap." So before I left that day, I said, "Would you ever want to try to write music together?" And he said, "Sure." So we swapped cell numbers, and he called me about maybe 3 to 4 weeks later and said, he lives in Oklahoma, but he comes back and forth to Nashville to work on record projects. He said, "I'm coming to Nashville. Why don't we just meet at Scott's studio
Yeah.
and we'll try to knock a couple tunes out." Anyways, we ended up writing over the course of a couple days 6 songs. One of those songs,
Wow.
one of those tunes was this song we're speaking about, Fiction.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that song came about, um, and this is kind of what happens a lot of times in the songwriting process. We sat down to write. We may have written some other things. I can't remember. I don't think this was the first song we wrote, but the way this song got its start was we were having a conversation about the state of the world, which is pretty cuckoo right now.
Yeah, to say the least.
We're divided as a nation, and the world seems like it's going crazy. And
Mm-hmm.
and and I've been a very serious reader of literature since I was about 22 or 23. Um, and the last 20 years specifically, I got into reading nonfiction books. It started by somebody giving me a copy of a book by Stephen Ambrose, um, who, anyways, he's a famous historical writer, and this
Mm-hmm.
book was called Undaunted Courage. It's about a documentation of Lewis and Clark's journey across
Oh,
America,
wow.
which started in St. Louis and went all the way to the Pacific Ocean. Anyways, that hooked me on reading historical books. So so Eddie and I are having this conversation. I'm like, I've got all these books in I've got hundreds of books, and a big portion of those books are nonfiction books.
Yeah.
Said, you know, I had just bought two books that I really wanted to read, and they were sitting on my nightstand. And I said to Eddie, with everything that's going on right now in the world, I said, I just don't want to read them. And he goes,
Exactly right.
and he said, well, why don't you want to read them? I said, because uh, nonfiction is just too much. I need some fiction. In other words, I need to read something. I need to go to this make believe world that
That's right.
has nothing to do with the reality of where I am at this moment in time. So that's how that song was born, and
Yeah.
it plainly addresses that line by line in the song. I think it's a really, I'm it's a great song actually.
Man, we need a lot more of that right now.
Well, yeah, you got to be
Man,
careful. You don't want to just put your head under a pillow, but whatever.
yeah, but still. What's like you're saying. Hey, now you've got some people that I guess these are just great interviews that you did in this
Mhm.
book. Of course, everybody knows out there that recently, my brother and I recently found out we were related to Loretta Lynn. And as as that type of person, I want to ask you about that interview with Loretta Lynn and how that went.
Well, it went amazing. My manager, Brian Smith, uh, and I drove out to Hurricane Mills, which is where
Mm-hmm.
it's where her house is that she and her husband lived in, and it's kind of a big compound. They actually took the house, the log cabin that Loretta and her sisters were raised in, and moved it from Kentucky up to Loretta's property in Hurricane Mills.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I had met her. I had met Miss Loretta in the late '80s when I was in Newgrass Revival, because we did a show at the Kennedy Center
Mm.
with her. We opened for her, and she's always just so nice to everybody.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't, it's like she doesn't know a stranger. I remember I have a picture of Loretta Lynn and I've taken in 1988. And of course, now she didn't remember this, but I got to be friends with both of her daughters, Patsy and Peggy,
Mm-hmm.
in the early '90s. We got to be friends, and we hung out some, and we would all sing together.
Wow.
Because the girls had a duo, and they were obviously in Nashville
Oh yeah.
working on working on a record deal. So, all right, so cut to the chase, Cowan. I can do this. So I decided when I had this radio show that one of the people that I really wanted to interview was Loretta Lynn.
Oh yeah.
So what I did was I got a hold of, I can't remember if I called Patsy or Peggy, but I talked to one of her daughters, and of course we knew each other, and I explained what the situation was. Have this radio show on WSM, and I'd really like to interview your mom.
Mm-hmm.
And they were like, okay. And I was like, really?
that's that's the easiest one. I'm telling you. Good Lord.
So we drove out to Hurricane Mills for this interview, and it was so amazing. Um,
Yeah, I can imagine.
this was before her health had taken a kind of a rough turn.
Yeah.
She was still, anyways, she welcomes us into her house. We go into her den, which is connected to her kitchen. Now, this is not an exaggeration. She had a in her kitchen, she had a table that was ran almost the length of the kitchen. And this is not an
Wow.
exaggeration. All right. So we get in there and she goes, are you boys hungry? And we're like, And I'm like, I'm thinking to myself, no, I'm about to pee my pants. I'm in
Yeah,
your house
exactly.
in a queue. And this table had every junk food snack you've ever seen in your entire life on there. It had
Wow.
Skittles and M&Ms and Reese's cups and Snickers bars and Three Musketeers, and then it had pretzels and potato chips and crackers and cheese. It's like she had prepared a feast for us. And but
Sheesh.
we were both so nervous we couldn't. And she kept going, "Honey, you sure you don't want something to eat?"
Yeah. That's amazing, man. But that sounds a lot like her. I mean, a lot of her relatives and stuff I've been able to get get in contact with and talk to and stuff. And that sounds like Loretta, right down the line. Now,
Yeah, I mean, she couldn't have been more pleasant. And she was
yeah,
funny. She was, she was just great.
she's she's
And
she's one of a kind, no doubt about it.
yeah,
Well, let's talk about Leon Russell.
let's
Leon
do.
seems to be one of your favorite guys in the whole world, man, from what I'm understanding. So let's talk about Leon.
All right, so I only ever had one real job in my life, and that was in 1972.
Wow.
I was living in my parents had moved, and I and my sister had moved to Evansville, Indiana, right before my senior year of high school, which I wasn't too happy about. But anyways, I ended up getting a job in a boat trailer factory and I worked on the assembly line for about half a year. Then the last half of that year that I worked there, I drove a uh, oh goodness gracious. Anyways, I drove a truck around with pallets on it
Oh,
and
tow
took
motor.
pallets. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, one of those things.
So that was my job. Anyhow, but the way I kept myself occupied in my brain, because if you ever worked on an assembly line, it's pretty much mindless work. It's just
Yeah.
repetition. In my head, I would sing and I would sing these songs, and most of them were Leon Russell songs. Because in 1972, Leon was the biggest ticket seller in North America. I mean, he was playing stadiums and filling them
Hmm.
up. So he was my musical hero. I loved everything. I knew those first two records of his, Leon Russell and the Shelter People, and then the Asylum Choir as well. Anyways, I knew those records backwards and forwards. And that's how I kept myself amused. Well, strangely enough, so there I am in the boat trailer factory. I'm singing and I'm doing my job every day. And 6 years later, I'm standing 3 feet from Leon Russell, playing in his band.
Holy crap.
Okay. So that was like, I remember we were his band for almost 3 years. And I remember probably the first 5 or 6 months, I couldn't even talk to him.
I can imagine, man. How
I mean,
could you?
he's kind of an intimidating figure to begin with.
Yeah.
He's like Mensa level smart to begin with. He doesn't
Wow.
suck with fools, but he took a liking to myself and Sam and Curtis and Courtney, who was the Newgrass Revival, who we were his
Yeah.
band for almost 3 years. And my friendship with Leon endured. In fact, 6 days before he passed away, his wife Jan and I and Leon went out to eat together.
Hmm.
He wasn't in the greatest shape, but I was, along with a lot of people, was terribly shocked that he passed away. I mean, it was 6 days after I'd gone out to eat with him over in Mount Juliet, where he lived at the time, that he passed away. So, but the point of that being that he and I had remained friends.
Yeah.
Like he did all sorts of nice stuff for me. Speaking of which, the reason that I got the interview show was when Brian Smith, my manager at the time, went to WSM to pitch this radio show. They were like, "Well, okay, but who can you get?" And so we said, uh, "We'll get right back to you on that."
Uh, we'll get right back to you on that.
And I well, I had to. So I had to. I thought, well, I'm just going to call Leon and ask him.
Yeah,
Now,
exactly.
the caveat to this is Leon hates interviews. He
I
hates interviews
bet.
more than anything in the world. And, much to my pleasant surprise, I called him on the phone. I said, "Hey, Leon, it's Cal." He goes, "What's up?" And I'm like, "Well, I have this chance to do a radio show on WSM, and if you would consent to being my guest, my first guest,
Oh
I
man.
probably can. I'll probably bag this show. They'll let me have a radio show if you say you'll do it." He was like, "Sure," and I was like shocked that he was like, because he hates
Wow.
interviews. So
Holy crap.
what's in the book? What's in the book? I think the first interview is with Leon, maybe, but
Hmm.
chronologically, he was the guy. So when we went back to WSM, they said, "Well, who can you get us?" And I said, "Leon Russell." They said, "What time do we start?"
Yep. Okay, that's enough of that, man. You got
Yeah.
no problems from then on, man, because the rest of these people that you interviewed, from Chris Christopherson to Bella Fleck to to Sam and everybody
Mhm.
else in the industry. I mean, it's this is, I'm sure there's a, another book in the works. It got to be, um, with everybody that no doubt about it. But let's talk about Newgrass. We got a few minutes left. Let's talk about Newgrass Revival. I know you do this. You can do this laundry list of people that are in the group, but my gosh, they're legendary. Newgrass has just opened a lot of doors for a lot of groups to come and do what they wanted to do with this type of music.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, even at the time, it's like, I mean, I met the Dixie Chicks when they were a trio, when Laura Lynch was still their singer, and this would have been 88,
Mm-hmm.
89. And the girls were just girls at that point, and now, of course, they're grown up. Um, the point being is that they were big fans of ours.
Wow.
And so and this is something that I think we were kind of like the Little Feat of bluegrass or country music, kind of like an
Mm-hmm.
artist, a cult artist band. Like
Yeah, you could say that.
I mean, we never made lots of money, and only in the last year that we were together were we starting to, maybe the last 3 years we were together. Once the videos started coming out on CMT and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
we finally were starting to realize um, some popularity and some that we up to then had not experienced.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Well, the thing about, what I always saw about Newgrass Revival was, it was a cool mixture of more popular music at the time. But man, you had that bluegrass thing going, and your voice comes busting through, dude. And that's the one thing about John Cowan that I always liked is, you know, it's it's always there. And it's not a booming voice, but man, I'm gonna tell you, you got some gas behind that. No doubt about it. You know.
thank you.
Well, it's I think that's more of a thing that's pretty you know, pretty adamant with a lot of people. I think, and I know Brian, known Brian for a few years, and it just amazes me how I talked to him one day, and he's like, "Yeah, I got to go talk to John." I was like, "John Cal, Brian, save me a seat," you know. But man, I really appreciate you sitting down with us today and telling these tremendous stories. And people need to get your book now. Where can they purchase this? They need to purchase it online, or how do we need to get it?
You can get it at Amazon. Most of the retail online outlets have it, but you can also, if you buy it on at www.johncowan.com, they're signed actually.
Ah,
Doesn't
there we
cost
go.
any of it doesn't cost any more money. You get a signed copy of your book
From
by
John
today.
Cowan. All right, that's
And that's not all you'll receive.
what's that?
we're throwing in these knives and this. No,
Yeah, yeah, we got to have those Ginsu knives, man. They go a long
yeah,
way. And the
yeah.
book is called "Hold to a Dream" by John Cowan, and a lot of great interviews. A lot of stories in there. Like I said, Leon Russell, Sam Bush, Bella Fleck, Chris Christopherson, Loretta Lynn, Rodney Crowell, John Carter Cash, and more. All
Jim
kinds of,
Messina, Bernie Ledden, Ruby
yeah.
Willie. Now,
Oh,
one of my we didn't go over this, but one of my favorite interviews in the book is with Gordon Stoker, who is the leader of the Jordanaires.
oh, really?
Oh yeah, he's one of my. He passed away a couple of years, but we were dear friends, and I mean, I love the Jordanaires. I mean, if you
Yeah.
read that interview, because you'll be shocked at how many million records they were on.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
how many records they sang on that sold millions and millions of copies. All the
Exactly.
stuff, all the stuff with Elvis, Pat's every Elvis single almost once he left Sun Records.
Yeah.
Also Patsy Cline. I mean, I could spend the next 10 minutes telling you all the people that the Jordanaires recorded with.
But we want them to buy the book, John.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, man,
My
have a good
record,
afternoon. You're in Dallas, you said, huh?
yes, my record will be called "100 John Cowan Fans Can't Be Wrong."
When is that coming out?
I'm just kidding. Don't you remember? Don't you remember? Don't you remember the Elvis record that said
Yeah,
Elvis Presley? A million Elvis fans can't be
can't be
wrong.
wrong.
Mine's 100.
I got you, man. Well, John, take it easy, and we appreciate you. Thanks for being on the Rick Dollar Show this week, and we will see you down the road.
All right, my brother. Be well, Rick. It's
Yes,
always
sir.
good to talk to you.
You too, man.